It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Maureen Muldoon. Maureen is the founder and spiritual director for Speakeasy, as well as an international speaker, writer, storyteller, and songbird who believes in the miraculous power of song storytelling for healing and transformation. I now give you Maureen Muldoon.
Thanks, Sherry. And thanks everyone for being here today. I just have to say thanks to Clive and to Beth because those prayers in that song were so perfect. And it just, again, always reminds me every Sunday, the healed mind doesn't plan. Like, I'm so glad I'm not, a control freak that's like, what are you going to pray? What are you going to sing? Like, you know what I mean? So nice to be surprised by the perfect hand of God that is always ever producing in the most miraculous and impeccable way. And this is just one place that I see that clearly, and I'm so grateful for it. So, welcome to a year of prayer. You might be thinking, what exactly does a year of prayer mean? Because in this world that's screaming in pain, in this world that's filled with fears and fires, it might sound like I'm saying, welcome to a year of shadow puppets. This year of symbols can sometimes feel like it doesn't mean anything. And even the phrase thoughts and prayers has become a defense for complacency. Like, I'm just going to give my thoughts and prayers. In the best of light, it can equate to prayers of hopelessness, thoughts and prayers. And in the worst light, it can feel like a tone deaf lip service saying, I will pray for you, which feels very egotistical in some ways, doesn't it? I'm sending you my prayers. And the world seems to scream back at us if we're not in integrity. Like, I don't need your intentions. I need your intervention. I need your prayers to grow some legs. And I need your prayers to cook me a meal. And I need your prayers to hand me a pair of socks. And I need your prayers to live simply so that others can simply live. That's what I need from your prayers. So the statement thoughts and prayers can feel like an empty and a very easy way to wash our hands of the world's suffering. But I don't think that it has to be the case because I have seen the extravagance that can come from the power of prayer. And I remembered the first time that I saw someone use prayer as a direct communication to God. I was maybe 6 and I was sitting in the church that I grew up in, and we had a big family of 10 people in my family, and at some point, maybe after the Eucharist, we were supposed to be kneeling and praying. And for me, this moment meant that I would be kneeling, and I'd rest my head on this wooden pew and I'd smell this crushed cloves, and I would just wait. I was a little kid. I didn't know what prayer was, and I wasn't really sure what was supposed to happen in that moment. And then I heard a whisper. It was barely a breathy, earnest little whisper. And I peeked over at my sister Erin, and she was just 2 years older than me. And she was speaking to someone who wasn't there. And her eyes were closed and her lips were moving. And I was trying not to eavesdrop because I knew that this was a private conversation. But it was my first realization, my initiation into the idea that prayer could be this connection for the common man like me, not just for priests and popes and and prophets, but for me and for my sister who was just a kid. And prior to that, I had been immersed, my family, in the glory be to the God, and our Father and Hail Marys. Like, I knew these types of prayers of stringing together, specific words that you would recite just to get the words right. But there was no real impact or implication of this. I didn't know that there was. I think this really struck me still because my sister Erin was and is an exceptional role model for me. 2 reasons. She does all the hard stuff, all the brave stuff she does. She does the stuff that you can't pay most people to do. She takes care of a community of children that are extra grace required. But she's always been like that. I've always watched her do the things that just made me stand back and gasp at a person's ability to be so brave, even as a child. And the other reason why she's such a good role model is that she weirdly always did it without the smear of martyrdom, like always sort of with this very happy, sense of humor. And not like it was a choice, but it is like a light that lives in her. And so when I saw her speaking to someone invisible, some invisible presence in church, I intuitively knew that this is where she was getting her chutzpah from. And I wanted in on that. And I began to entertain a relationship with this thing called God. Then not too long after that, I remember that book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, like went like wildfire through our house. I have 5 older sisters, so it was just like passed down from one to the other. And prayer began to shift and change. And as I grew, my relationship with the idea of prayer began to mature. And as did my relationship with this God of my own understanding. Much like any good story, a prayer, an earnest and a well-placed prayer, I would come to find could really change everything. And then many, many years later, about when I was about 27, I was in this other church in California called Agape. Probably was my first time in the church, and I watched this woman walk to the pulpit and set fire to a prayer in a way that broke my mind and made me know that she had known God on a first name basis. And as soon as the service was over, I ran after her and I found her like a little weird stalker that I was. And I asked her, like, what was she doing? I was an actress at the time. I knew how to deliver lines, but what she did was she carved consciousness. She lit the room from an internal switch. And she'd given me a peek into the palpable and present tense spiritual authority that I didn't even know was available to me. And she told me that she was a prayer practitioner. And I asked her how long, how long did that take her to become a prayer practitioner? And she said 5 years. And I remember that I stood before this very formidable goddess, this well-anchored, well-appointed Black woman and her very patient husband who was waiting for her. And they were both making time for me, this messy, scrappy little white girl who was, just thirsty. I mean, I was really the embodiment of thirsty, and not in a good way. And I knew 2 things in that moment when she told me that it took 5 years. I knew, one, that I really wanted to be a prayer practitioner. And the other thing I knew for sure was that I was never going to be a prayer practitioner. I just knew it. I knew it because at that moment, I could not imagine devoting 5 years of my life to the study of prayer. Like, that just seemed like going to the moon, And God, the funny thing is that I'm happy to report to you that I was only wrong about one of those things. It didn't take me 5 years, though. It took me 10 years. It took me 10 years to become a prayer practitioner. And for the past 2 decades, I have used this tool of prayer. And it has benefited every single area of my life in immeasurable ways. And I now look back at that 6-year-old in the church, and I look back at that 27-year-old thirsty girl in the church, and I look at that 36-year-old woman who showed up at church as a spiritual practitioner. And it reminds me, when I look at my journey with prayer, it reminds me of 2 things. That, one, I have learned a lot about prayer, and 2, I have a lot to learn about prayer. I have a lot to learn about prayer because it keeps evolving, It keeps teaching me something. And so I'm excited to continue to follow the river. So I'm sorry I'm so emotional today, but this is a no apology zone. It's just going to happen. So I wanted to start off this year and this talk with a story about the power that lives back of the spiritual practice, back of all spiritual practices, actually. It's a story given to us about our desert fathers and Abbas. So Abba in the Aramaic language means father. And so this is a story about 2 Abbas. And so Abba Lak goes to see Abba Joseph. Maybe this is his mentor and his teacher. And he says to him, Abba, as far as I can see, I say my daily prayers and I fast and I pray and I meditate and I live in peace, as far as I can, and I purify my thoughts. What else can I do? And the older man stood up and he stretched out his arms towards the heaven, and his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said to him, if you want, you can become all flame. And so we approach this year of prayer, having been prepared, just like Avalot, by all of the prior prayers, by all of the fasting, by all of the meditations, all of the willingness that we have devoted our lives to, all of the symbols of sacredness. But these will remain just symbols of sacredness if we don't light them up. There's a fire to be had. There's a fire to be fanned. There's a fire to be felt for you and me in our prayer practice. And we can invite that in the same way that Saint Teresa of Avalon, the Spanish mystic, invited it in by saying, burn from me all that is not God. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to have that experience? You might think that might sound like a martyr stance, but when you align yourself with the brilliance, there's no loss, only the acquisition of everything. When you seek first God, all else is given. That's the spiritual principle that we're basing this on. And when the Desert Father suggested that we be all flame, it does not mean that your prayers will be lit and on fire like that practitioner that I first met. They may be. It doesn't mean that you will be using prayer to serenade and seduce all of your desires from the shadows. You might. It doesn't mean that your prayers are going to immediately cause you to be incredibly articulate and mystically poetic. It could happen. You could become golden tongued and filled with prophet and poetry. You might. But it might be that you find something even more valuable. You might reach the place where your prayers continue without ceasing. Your life might become that one river of prayer that includes even the simple and the silent prayers as well. And even the one-word prayers like help and thanks and wow, as Annie Lamott suggested in her book, Help, Thanks, Wow. But it might be not just the words, but the flame that's back of all of it. The prayer is a stained glass window in the middle of the night. The faith is the flame. It's what happens to the window when the sun rises. And this is the truth for you and me. It's the flame that can alchemize everything into prayer. So the symbol of this flame is interesting because we have been very well groomed in the fear of fire. I mean, we've been taught about hell. That's just fire, right? And we saw the power of flames when we witnessed its level of, audacity when it took down whole towns in Los Angeles and Hawaii and many other places in the world. And so flames can call our attention and be clarifying and can be very cleansing and very powerful, almost too powerful to think about touching. But I'm going to invite you to touch the flame of your faith this year. And flames can also be humble too, and subtle, as was shown to us this past week in the National Prayer Service when Bishop Marion Edgar Bubb demonstrated that humble truth, that peaceful pacing, that the asking instead of demanding for mercy on the behalf of those less fortunate, that this gentle approach can also be the very thing that causes a holy hailstorm. Truth carries so much power. Truth is consistency. This is what the Course in Miracles tells us, that your thoughts, that your mouth, that your heart are in alignment. When you begin to live in this consistency, there's going to be this fire that boils up from you, and it will scare the hell out of you, literally. It will make you do things you didn't know you could do. One flame of truth can make people stand and take note, whether you agree with the words spoken or not. This bishop that we got to see this past week, her words landed just like in California, like soft rain on a thirsty world. One flame, says Gandhi, one flame, 1,000 candles can be lit by, and the life of that one candle is never shortened by its generosity. And this is the truth about prayer as well. It's always mutually healing. It's never one praying for the other. It's only ever one praying for the whole, not one flame, but all flame. And that's not something that can be taught, this flame, because you don't need to learn what you already have. You already have access to this. All you need to do is accept it. When I teach prayer, which I'm going to be doing with Bella Beth Gordon in the next couple of weeks, we're going to kick it off with this practice of affirmative prayer, which is what I learned to become a prayer practitioner, which is the prayer that that woman did when she lit the house on fire. When we teach affirmative prayer, I tell the participants, we can show you, how to do it. We can give you the recipe for affirmative prayer. We can inundate you with poetry and vocabulary. We can set you up with prayer partners. We can even hold you accountable with your practice. We can do all of those things, but we cannot give you the fire. We can't. We can't give you something that's already yours. This is something that is internally sourced. So your prayers will either lay limp, lifeless, or your prayers will be fat and full and faithful and swollen with the promise of miracles and life. And to court that flame, to touch the hem of our own divinity, is something you can continue to do. And the ways that you do that is, one, you remember that God is capable of all things. You do not underestimate your God. And number two, you do not douse your flames with the waters of worry. Just stop. Just stop doing that. That is a fickle faith that will not manifest. It doesn't matter how big your God is. It matters how fierce, how impeccable your faith is. Thomas Merton put it this way. He said, the spiritual life is the life of man's real life, the life of the internal, the interior self, whose flame is so often allowed to be smothered under the ash of anxiety and futile concerns. You want to learn how to live in the conviction of your word. And Merton goes on to say, on the contrary, without a life of spirit, our whole existence becomes unsubstantiated and illusory. The life of the spirit, by integrating us in the real order established by God, puts us in the fullest possible contact with reality. And again, reality is love, not as we imagined it, but as it really is. It does so by making us aware of our own real self, placing us in the presence of God. That's what that practitioner did for me all those years ago back in that church. She placed me in the presence of God because she placed herself in the presence of God. This, I think, would be a really great way to begin all prayer, to remember you are the flame, and to remember you are in the presence of God, which might seem awkward to affirm that for yourself at first. Awkward, like that feeling when you kneel for prayer. I don't know about you, sometimes when my husband's sleeping and I kneel down on the side of the bed for prayer, I feel a bit awkward. Or awkward, like when it feels like to be the first one out on the dance floor. But man, somebody's got to be, right? Awkward when it comes to telling somebody something that you don't want to tell them or that they don't want to hear. It feels awkward. But the good news is when you do these brave things, when you do these true things, it's only ever awkward for the first 1,000 times. And then it gets easier. Thomas Merton believed that the spiritual life is not something to be studied or known, but rather something to be lived, which is always going to be both awkward and awesome. This is also the truth about the type of prayer that we're going to venture into this year. At first, it's going to feel awkward. I remember the first time my husband and I went to counseling with my first minister, and we were just going there because we wanted to have an even more healthy relationship. And he said to us, you two go home and pray together. And we were like, what? You're so not doing that. It felt so awkward. My husband and I had done everything together. And the one thing we hadn't done was pray together. And I'll tell you, it was awkward. But awkward is awesome. These things, these parts of yourself, these facets of yourself, these fascinating facets of yourself should not go unlived. And so when we pray without ceasing, everything becomes prayer. Sex becomes prayer. Reading a book becomes prayer. Working becomes prayer. Cooking becomes prayer. Walking becomes prayer. Our lives become one long, beautiful, woven prayer, because prayer can be many, many things and is all things: words and intentions, breath, stillness, art, songs. It can be a cup of coffee. Prayer can be a space of kindness. Prayer can be listening. Prayer can be listening. Mary Oliver, one of our favorite poets, says, it doesn't have to be a blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot, or small stones, a few small stones. Just pay attention. Then patch a few words together, and don't try and make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but a doorway into thanks and a silence into which another voice may speak. That's what she calls prayer. A doorway of thanks and silence into which another voice may speak. I mean, this woman's brilliant. The other voice that she's speaking of is your muse, your compass, your guide, your North Star, your God. That's the other voice. To hear the voice of God, we ask to begin with stillness. Be still and know God. And when we know God, we know ourselves. So Clive's song this morning, be still and know yourself. That's like, yeah, bang on. Prayer begins with stillness, though, and then it ends with stillness. And in the middle, there's stillness. There's transformation that happens in the stillness. Prayer invites us into this slowing down, this recognition that the peace we're seeking is already within us, and it's shining so brightly, waiting to be uncovered. In the Course, it says, the peace of God is shining in me now. Are these just words on the page, or do you get to feel them viscerally? Because when you feel them viscerally, it becomes a living prayer. The prayer or the affirmation says, the peace of God is shining in me now. I will be still. I mean, it's giving us the recipe. I will be still and let the earth be still along with me. And in that stillness, we will find the peace of God. It's within my heart, which witnesses to God himself. And I'm not a body. I'm free. I'm still as God created me. That's lesson 188. Essentially, what it's saying is, I'm a living prayer. This passage is both a promise and a proclamation. It reminds us of the benefits of peace, like the benefits of prayer. It's not something we must chase. It's something we uncover through stillness, through meditation, through the practice of tending to our souls. Most people do more ticking than tending. We tick things off our list, blip, 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 blip. But we never tend to our souls. We never tend to our lives. When you tend to your life, that's like a living prayer. You could tick off making dinner, or you could tend to the food. You could tick off putting your kids to bed, or you could tend to them. Prayer gives us the opportunity to tend to our lives and to be tender in our lives. That's what prayer looks like. And if you think about the word tender, tender also means an unconditional offering for a good received. Reverend Michael Beckwith, who was my first minister at Agape, he defines prayer in this way. He says, embracing reality without trying to get anything from it. So that's pretty cool. But what is reality? Well, the good news is Course in Miracles tells us exactly what it is. It gives us this differentiator that says nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Embracing the unthreatenable state of love is how we embrace reality. Martin Luther King, who just had a celebration this past week also, says love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. It's beautiful. True love is without conditions. And so Reverend Beckwith was suggesting to us that we embrace love without trying to get anything from it, an unconditional way of being. This is how the Course in Miracles says it. And it says this in a section called Answered Prayer. It says, prayer is a way offered by the Holy Spirit to reach God. It's not merely a question or an entreaty. It cannot succeed until you realize it's asking for nothing. How else could it serve its purpose? It's impossible to pray for idols and hope to reach God. True prayer must avoid the pitfalls of asking to entreat. Ask rather to receive what is already given, to accept what is already there. It's already here. Everything that you're seeking is seeking you. It's already right here. There is no lack. There's no scarcity in God. All answers are right here. Stillness affords us the opportunity to move through the threshold to that eternal state of consistent and unconditional love that is the answer to all questions, even the answer before the questions come. When you've been given everything, why would you ask for more? That would be an insane thing to do. Praying, knowing it's done, praying, knowing that it's been answered, is how you tap into that gnosis. We've heard this in songs, God bless the child that has its own, that has its own. Do you have your own? The Song of Prayer tells us that prayer is the greatest gift with which God blesses us. It was then what it is now. So it's the same thing it was, it will continue to be. It's simply a song sung in harmony between Father and Son, a song of thanksgiving. And this is how creation is extended when we move into the song of gratitude between us and our Creator. Thank you, God. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, God. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, God. Thank you, Clive. You just go back and forth of this thank you. That's all that's happening. That's why, when Annie Lamont wrote that book, Thanks, Help, Wow, that really thanks and wow. And I think it's kind of cool when we see the same scenarios played out in so many different ways in songs, in books, in spiritual philosophy. In this section, it says, his Son gives thanks for his creation in the song of his creating in his Father's name. His Son gives thanks for his creation in the song of his creating in his Father's name. So the question is that I would love for you to contemplate as we enter into this year of prayer. What are you creating in the name of love? Answer that question, and you will know how to be a living prayer. What are you creating in the name of love? When you answer this question, you will have your roadmap. This is how we move from thoughts and prayers to the embodiment of prayer, to a full faith and fiery embodiment of prayer. What are you creating in the name of love? I ask you to take that to your internal teacher and then share it when you're ready with a community member, with the whole community, if you like, during the conversation, or just begin to share it with people. Begin to share it with people that you trust. This is what I'm creating this year in prayer. I'm creating this in the name of love, for love, as love, in love, with love. So I can't fail because it's already done unto me as I believe. But this is what I'm up for, and I'm no longer going to be stifled by my own fears. Like I was stifled in the very early beginnings of my journey when I was like, that's not going to happen. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. This is not true. The ego will throw 1,000 reasons to sideswipe you. And we get to remind each other, this is not true. What's true is that affirmative prayer and affirming the ideas of prayer in your life, as your life, in your life, this is possible for you this year to create in the name of love. So this is not just a year of prayer, but a year of fearless transparency and gratitude for the fulfillment of the word. And there might be hiccups and there might be holdbacks to your creating in love. And that's okay. We have a year to walk together. We have a year to walk each other home, to wake each other up. And if we get there before the year is done, we'll spend the rest of the year just singing the song of gratitude for how awesome it is to be living in your prayers. And as we move through this year of prayer, we'll hear from many people, many practitioners and philosophers and keynote speakers about prayer and how it's done in different cultures and different societies. And maybe we will partner up in prayer partnership. And if you don't have a prayer partner, maybe you could either get one or you could ask us to help you set one up, because it's really nice to have a weekly check-in with somebody where you just pray, even if you don't know how to pray, or if you think you don't know how to pray, that you just begin to pray with each other. And so we're going to attempt to pray without ceasing. And as we do, we will receive the promises, just like in the 12 step. These prayers come with more promises than you could ever even name, new freedoms, new happiness, healings of regret and remorse, embodiment of serenity and peace, clarity of purpose, erosion of pain and self-pity. That's not too much to ask. Not from the size of a God that we have. And so, on we go to this new freedom, to practice without ceasing. And in this eternal prayer, we will embody this eternal love. This love that, as Seneca says, this love in its essence is spiritual fire. I'm excited about that. And that's the word. I told you this one was for you, right, Sherry?
Yeah. Thank you, Maureen. This was an answer to an unrealized question.
Mm.
Prayer without ceasing has always been my goal.
Oh,
The time that
really?
first time that I read that statement. But what has made me go, oh, I don't know, is there so much prayer for things, idols, outcomes. Um,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people have no idea how to pray without praying for an outcome that
Yeah.
they desire.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. Absolutely. I think that's why A Course in Miracles specifically points it out. You're going to pray, but we don't want you to put idols in the middle of your prayer. You know, we want you just to go to God and say, hey, hi, how you doing? This is awesome. Thank you for my shoes, for my breakfast, for my husband. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you know, when someone comes to you in gratitude, you're just like, oh my God, I love this. I want to give them some more, you know, and God has a vantage point that we don't have. So when we just go in gratitude, in earnest gratitude, it activates this wellspring of wonder that is beyond, because Sherry, you and I both know everything that's come to us that's been good and beautiful and holy, we didn't have on our vision board, and at first probably came very masqueraded in something we did not want.
Yeah.
So it's best if we don't try and give God a shopping list and develop a trust with a higher power that like is capable of surprising us in the most wonderful ways.
Yeah,
Because otherwise we shortchange ourselves. You know, when
we
the
do.
Course tells us in the beginning of these lessons, like, this is for your own best interest, we all go to like, oh, so I'm going to be sitting on a sandy beach with a drink in my hand and an umbrella. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, that's as far as our best interest, you know, can get us, like some sort of waterfront property. And God's like, man, she's got no idea, you know? And I like said to somebody on the call the other day, is like, you know, we think we want to experience in these beachy sunrises, but we would trade 1 billion of those when we recognize that we could have the witness one sunrise, one of our sons, one of our friends rise. When we see somebody rise to a greater degree of their potential, like you would give up 1,000 quote unquote, you know, Pinterest sunrises for that. My ego doesn't want me to know that's my best interest. My ego is going to always go for the form.
So true.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see Liliana has her hand up. Good morning, Liliana.
Good morning. Maureen, so beautiful, this talk. Thank you. And I wanted to share something. The other night, I woke up real early, and usually when I wake up early in the night, I say, I want to, you know, I want to listen to something meaningful as I'm going back to sleep. And I said, well, I was reading this book, you know, Never Forget to Laugh by Carol Howe, and and so okay, I'll start listening to that. And as I was listening to that, I said, oh, I really want to listen to some Gangaji because I loved listening to Gangaji. And I said, but Carol Howe's book won out. And I just have to read where I was at in the book. And this is where I was at in the book. So I chose this book over Gangaji's book that I'm reading, Diamond in Your Pocket. So Bill was always forthright about needing help with wanting to forgive. He often said that his major prayer was help, or the expanded version, help me do this. It was no more specific than that regarding either the subject or object of his prayer. His deepest desire was to completely forgive everyone and everything. In her book, You Are That, the American teacher Gangaji describes what we set in motion with the simple prayer help. And I went, oh my gosh, I get to have my cake and eat it too. But this is what in her book, help is here. You are never separate from help. Anytime you ask for help, help presents itself. It is beautifully humbling to ask for help. It is good to give up your idea of independence. Just say, please help, and you will see instantly that every enlightened being in every realm, known and unknown, from all the dimensions charted and uncharted, is immediately supporting, helping, reminding, pushing, pulling, embracing, holding, shaking, or doing whatever is needed. Your plea for help cuts through all the past arrogance, past all arrogance. You are helped immediately because you are calling the truth of yourself. And the Course in Miracles echoes this. Everyone here has entered darkness, yet no one has entered it alone. For he has come with heaven's help with him, ready to lead him out of darkness into light at any time. The time he chooses can be any time, for help is there, awaiting but his choice. And when he chooses to avail himself of what is given him, then he will see each situation that he thought before was means to justify his anger turned into an event which justifies his love. He will hear plainly that the calls to war he heard before are really calls to peace. And that's in chapter 25. I don't have the exact thing, but I just thought it was so beautiful. And just even the synchronicities of, I wanted to listen to Gangaji, but I really wanted to listen to Carlo. And exactly where the book was, it was right there it's in chapter, it's Bill's Final Days, which is a beautiful, beautiful accounting of how he completely fulfilled the Course in Miracles. I mean,
Is it Don't Forget to Laugh, or is it His Final Days?
it's the book. The book is Never Forget to Laugh, but
Okay. I love it. I have that book. I haven't read that part.
yeah.
That is, well, that's it right there, isn't it? You think you sacrifice something when you go to God. God's like, oh, I'll give you a Course in Miracles. I'll throw in some Gangaji. I'll give you a little Bill Pfeffer. You know what I mean? It's like there's no limit. There's no
Yeah.
limit.
Yeah.
And I think it's Deepak Chopra who says, like, when you begin to awaken to this power, your brow will become unfurrowed, you'll stop worrying so much, and you will begin to see the exquisite synchronicities in everything. Like, we hear this and we go, oh my God, isn't that amazing? No, it's her life. That sounds like the perfect echo to Liliana's life, of course. So that's gorgeous. I just love that. I was trying to think of an acronym for HELP. Holy Emerging Love's Presence or something. We'll figure it out. Anybody who can think of one, put it in the chat. Thanks, Liliana. Hi, Raina.
Hi. I've only been attending for a few weeks with you guys, probably since the new year. My friend Elena invited me, and I also concurrently started doing The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron to help spark my creativity, but I am just really struck lately by all the synchronicities, and so I can't believe that was just said because yeah, like being a creator and what will I create in the name of love? And I personally struggle a lot with thinking of God as a person, especially as a father. I struggle with that. But I know that I can think of God as different things. So that's something that Julia, encourages you to do. But I certainly do feel the spirituality more so in after having only been doing this for 3 or 4 weeks. And so I'm really happy to be sharing with you guys. And I'm like with the prayer thing, I struggle with this idea of praying to somebody at times. But I loved what you said about like seeing prayer in everyday things that you do. So walking in a beautiful setting. And in fact, that's something that my group was just talking about in The Artist's Way. So I thank you for your message today. And I am especially thinking about what I will create in the name of love.
Yeah, and just like use your morning pages to like unearth it and unearth it and unearth it. And when you get to it, like bring it up and share it and say, this is what I'm going to create today in the name of love. This is what I'm going to create this week in the name of love. This is what I'm going to create this year. This is what I'm devoting my life to create in the name of love. And that'll always shift and change. In regards to pronouns, you're like, yeah, I know. Yeah. These are symbols twice removed, and so all is included, nothing's excluded, and everybody gets to call by God by whatever name is most helpful to them. And we sometimes just use the symbols that have been passed down because it's just easy. And also, it's God, there's a lot there to say, but you already, everybody gets to make peace with what works for them. And that's the most beautiful thing of all, is that you get to experience your connection with, whether it seems like a deity on a cloud, or whether it feels like an intellect or an intelligence that guides you, or whether it feels, whatever it feels like for you is what's real for you. For me, when I mostly don't personify my God, but when I do, I tend to see her as a grandmother who's waiting in this like Irish cottage with like a kettle of tea. That's what my personified God looks like, because that's where I would feel most comfortable spilling my guts, So the wonderful thing is you get to decide for yourself, without, what I would suggest is, without making any other person or pronoun wrong. Choose what you will from the massive palette of God, So yeah, so funny about the synchronicities though. Isn't that funny? I love that. Just like
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel's little breadcrumbs taking us home, and expect it and expect it and expect it and expect it. I had more to tell you, but I forgot what it was. So you'll have to come back next week. Oh, well.
Thank you, Raina.
Thank you.
Celeste had put in the chat for help. Hallelujah, everyday love provides.
Oh, love it, Celeste. Of course you would come up with that. Reverend Celeste is going to come and give a sermon at our community soon. We have to just get her a date. Hallelujah, everyday love provides. Now that sure puts a new spin on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a synchronicity. Well, it's a lot of synchronicity because they're all around us when we take time to look at it. But I was drawing this. I do this 30-day drawing thing, and I was drawing this piece of. I said, and our exercise today was to to draw something that you don't think is a piece of artwork, like a clove of garlic, but it has to be something that was once alive, that is no longer, that is now in a dried state or whatever. And I said, oh, I have this dulse. I have this sea dulse that I absolutely love. And many times I feel like, especially in these times, I feel like when I'm praying or when I'm navigating, I always like to equate myself as a piece of seaweed, like to be like a piece of seaweed in the ocean. And so I painted the dulse, and I said, I really want a poem to go with this when I do my posting of my drawing today. And and this poem just came right up in my first poem of poems, because I get this poem things, and it's called, and this is the poem, Where the Waters Are Tender. And just even the title of that is so beautiful, Where the Waters Run Tender. I am keeping faith in seaweed, now the kelp. Oh, and it's by Stephanie K. Merrill. I am keeping faith in seaweed, now the kelp, the dulse, the nori, the alaria, manifesting salt from the sea. For this salt of the earth flesh, this ocean, this deep dive of cells, I am eating billions of years backwards. Everything in the sea is the sea. Everything in the body is the body, opening doors to all that roars in the waves, in the healings in the sudden archive of grief, in these carnival days, in these carnival names, in these carnival stalls called lost. Every night now I dine with the porpoises, with the turtles, with the manatees rather, not the matinees, with the manatees, among tender curtains swaying just below the high water mark. These oxygen changing relics from the seed millennia, this fresh home with all its ancestral, essential hopefulness, where the waters are tender. I just really love that.
So good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so
It's
good.
breathtaking. Yeah. Just the image is there the whole time you're reading it. It's just beautiful. Thank you, Liliana. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Thank-
so the point of that is that anything can be a prayer. Like that's a prayer, you know, and it's beautiful prayer. So thanks.
Oh,
My-
that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say to Raina. You know, this is a great question. The question was how, you know, I'm not comfortable praying to a God outside myself. Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. And even Clive's song was like, be still and know yourself. And so the image that I was given for that was the infinity sign. So you have a circle and it's twisted in the middle, and the illusion is that it's twisted. And in the twisting of it, there becomes this illusion of duality where I'm on one side and God's on the other. And that's why it's if it's twisted in my mind, it's okay because it's only gently twisted, and it can be easily untwisted where I return to the whole of myself. But for now, it still seems like there's this deity outside myself that's peering in on me. And in some ways, you know, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. In some ways, I think we've created this duality because we didn't want to be by ourselves. We wanted a playmate. So that's not such a bad thing. And in this infinity, it's just like what the Course is teaching us, that if you think of an infinity sign, like love comes in and says, thank you, Raina. And then Raina receives it and she takes it and she creates something and she returns it to this source. And she says, thank you, source. And then source receives it and takes it and then returns it to her. And in that way, we literally have this image of what the Course is attempting to teach us in this eternal song of gratitude between you and your source. And for now, it seems like it's duality, even though it's just a twisted version of it. And for now, it feels like that's what our mind enjoys. It enjoys playing ping pong with God, and that's okay. And if you don't like that, you can go back to, you know, a unified ocean of Om, where it's just Om. But for now, if you're playing ping pong, enjoy. Enjoy the game. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you, Maureen. I do have to ask, how could you forget that?
Well, she said so many lovely things. In my mind,
I mean, it's such a beautiful image and it's so deep. Wow.
yeah, it is
Remembering it.
it's a very helpful image. And the answer to that question is, we fall asleep 1,000 times a minute and we get to wake each other up. You know, I mean, I don't know why I keep falling asleep, but the good thing is I keep waking up.
Well, community, that's this Sunday. Thank you for joining us. We hope to connect with you at one of our events during the week. We're so glad you're here. We will be here next week, same time, same place, same station.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Clive. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Bye.
Bye.